Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of my podcast, The Pondering Vista. Our guest today is Mr. Jonny Thompson. Yes, the Jonny Thompson of Mini Philosophy. For those who don't know, he's the author of Mini Philosophy, an award winning international bestseller, which has been translated into over 20 languages. A wonderful book that teaches philosophy one bite at a time. He taught philosophy in Oxford for more than a decade before becoming a full time writer. He's a staff writer at Big Thing, where he writes about philosophy, theology, psychology, and other subjects. His first book is the aforementioned Mini Philosophy. His second book, Mini Big Ideas, was published in 2023. It was such a privilege and an honor to be able to have a conversation with Jonny. I hope you love it as much as I did. Join us as we take a walk through what made Jonny switch from teaching to writing, why he loves Aristotle's way of looking at the world with the goal of life being flourishing and chasing excellence, why he hates people trying to break the thought experiments, how the famous mini philosophy community started and has grown to what we all know and love today. Johnny's top lists of books to read, and much more. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jonny Thompson. Welcome to Pondering Vista. This is crazy though. I don't know how I was able to get in touch with you and get a chance to talk to you. This is like almost a dream come true. This is like something out of a dream scenario.
Oh, that's kind of you. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
love talking to people generally about about philosophy generally and
Mhm.
just meeting new people really. So yeah, no, thank you. It's very kind of you to say that.
You've been a teacher of philosophy, psychology, and theology for over a decade now.
Mhm.
And now you've transitioned into writing. And I've
Mm,
read a ton of your articles, they're like crazy.
mm.
How did your shift from teaching to writing happen? I assume it takes a lot of grit and courage to shift from a regular, uh, proper systematic job to something like writing. Even though, yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
but although what you were teaching and what you write about are not like entirely unrelated, even though,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's a whole different field. So,
Yeah. No, thank
how
you.
was the?
No, it's a good question. The actual the original idea for the mini philosophy Instagram account came about when we had like a staff inset day, which are these training days you have over in the UK. I think you have everywhere in the world really. And we had a guest speaker at the time talking about something called dual coding, which is this idea in kind of educational psychology, but it's pretty common sense, really. The idea is that if you present a student with two different forms of media, they will digest that content better and they'll retain it better.
Hmm.
So this could be any media. It could be audible. It could be a podcast. It could be text. It could be videos. It could be maybe even touch kinesthetic kind of thing. But I decided to kind of like therefore make sure that all of my lessons were included an image and text.
Hmm.
And then so I spent a lot of time making these like quite flashy PowerPoints at the time, and they were quite they were decent. This was the early 2010s. I was doing this, and that nowadays they look awful, but then they were looking okay. And so I thought, right, okay, let's try and put this online. Let's try and put these little images. So I was doing these minimalistic kind of like pictures of kind of like stick figure. They're kind of like they're block figures. They're called pictograms technically, but and I got a subscription. I actually bought Photoshop back in the day. You can't really do it nowadays because Adobe locks you into having a subscription. But back then I bought Photoshop. Which cost a lot, but then I spent Photoshop kind of like tinkering around, making these images to represent certain ideas. So, for example, it started off very similarly, like Descartes. For example, if I'm doing Descartes' dualism, I have like a head which is white and
Hmm.
a body which is black. It's simplistic kind of like representation.
Hmm.
Or if I was doing like Spinoza's kind of like idea of pantheism and monism, I would have like a blob in the middle and all little bodies kind of connected to it. You know, little things like that. And the students liked it. They thought they were quite funny, and it kind of like it kind of acted as an anchor for them to retain it. So then, yeah, I uploaded those onto Tumblr originally.
Mm.
Weirdly, I mean, Tumblr's completely a non-entity now, and that did really well in Tumblr. So it got it got 3,000 followers on Tumblr,
Oh.
and I look back at them; they're still out there. I think if you dig around the internet, and they're very low resolution. I didn't realize that you need to do better resolution. And they were a little
Mm.
bit weird backgrounds, and they weren't quite as polished as they are now.
Mhm.
So I started doing that, and then that kind of took off. So then I moved to Instagram, and my wife said to me, "I don't think Instagram's the right media for that. I don't think Instagram's the right platform for your kind of stuff." And I said, "I'll give it a go anyway." And so I put it on Facebook and Instagram at the same time,
Mhm.
and weirdly, Instagram took off. This was about 6 years ago now, and this is I've been at it for a long time. It kind of like it didn't
Mm.
take off straight away. It was kind of poodling along at about a few hundred followers and went to a thousand followers and stuff. I mean, it's a grind, really. The early days of
Mhm.
any social media influencer is a grind. You have to engage all of the time, even when the algorithms change. I think the basic
Right.
recipe is the same. Just like engage all of the time with people, and they'll engage back with you and follow accounts and follow back. And eventually, there are a few accounts along the way who reposted me. There's one in particular called Art, History, and Literature, who I'm actually working with recently, collaborating. He's still around doing his own thing, and he reposted me, and I woke up overnight with like a few thousand followers more. I was like, wow, okay. And then once you get to about 10,000, there is a kind of a vague snowball effect.
Mm.
I find that you kind of get more followers, and they kind of spread the word, they repost and stuff, and
Mm.
you start to like the algorithm starts to favor you a little bit more.
Mm.
Um, so I'm rambling here. Tell me to stop. Jump in if you want to stop. I can just carry on
No, no, no,
talking,
no.
and the mod.
Please, please.
Plenty. And then so then what happened is I was doing that for about 4 years, possibly maybe less, 3 years, and by that time I had I was doing like 2 posts every week for about 4 years, so I had like 200 whatever 300 images and text, and
Mhm.
then so I thought, right, what I should do now is collect the best ones, because over 4 years essentially I'm practicing my writing. It's
Yeah.
like a blog essentially. You're shouting into a void, but what you're doing
Mhm.
is you're honing your voice and you're learning your skill, and you're working out also what works well and what doesn't. And actually, in hindsight, I think social media and the algorithm is a very good kind of
Validator?
playground, but
Yeah.
also school for
Mm.
writing, because you have to learn what keeps engagement, because you've got a very real interaction with people,
Mm.
and what gets low follow account, what gets low engagement, low likes, you can think, okay, well, clearly that something about that post didn't work. Maybe it was the image, maybe it was the text, maybe it was the thing, and then eventually you kind of hone that ability to have like a hook at the start, and then to have
Mm.
keep condense your words down. Because also the other thing is like with Instagram captions, it used to be that you could only have 2,200 characters. I think that is still
Mm.
true.
Mm.
So anything you want to explain, you have to massively reduce down, and all good writing has been heavily edited down. Like I can't remember
Right.
who it said. I think either Mark Twain, Oscar Wilde possibly said that, "I'm sorry that this letter was too long. I didn't have enough time to edit it."
Shit.
And the idea is that the actual writing stuff, I find, is still true. Actually, it's actually quite quick. I could probably bash out an article within about half an hour to an hour. The actual editing is the bit which takes a couple of days or a
Uh,
day. Um, so yeah, so I was working. So those are two skills I was learning through doing the Instagram was that, yeah, to get a hook, keep it engaged, and to condense and edit your stuff down. So then I presented like I think about maybe 10 of the best ones I could to a few agents. I kind of like found a website which had lots of UK book
mm.
agents. I think I emailed about 10 at the time, and the next day, a guy called Charlie Brotherstone, who's my now agent, emailed back saying, "I really like your stuff. I think there's potential here. Let's go with it." So together we worked on the proposal. We polished up a book idea, and we shipped that out to all the publishers that we could find, really, and we got like one or two bites. And eventually, it kind of went to a bidding war between publishers, which is great. So I ended up with my eventual publisher, who are called Wildfire, because
Mm.
they're really appealing to me,
Mm.
and the book did really well.
Yeah.
It sold in 21 countries as of now. Sorry, 21 languages, so probably considerably more countries
Yeah.
actually, which is good because it means like essentially when you release a book in 21 countries, you're essentially spread betting, aren't you? You're kind of
Yeah.
like saying, well, some countries and it did. Some countries are completely flopped. It wasn't. Not. I mean, it sold, but wasn't particularly well. I think
Mm.
Italy didn't sell particularly well, for example, but some countries did. So South
Yeah.
Korea, Poland, and Germany
Mhm.
just
Mm.
completely blew up. It did really well.
Oh.
So that then got me a second book deal and a third book deal, which we kind of signed pretty close together.
Mhm.
And then, so as I was writing the first book, my agent suggested to me what you should probably do is try to do some self publicity. What you should do is email lots of outlets, media outlets, and say, look, hi, I've got this Instagram account and I've written a book. I will write you a free article in return
Mm.
for you plugging my book. I'll just write it
Mm.
for free if you say at the end, buy Johnny's
Mm.
book. And I did that about 6 or 7 kind of different publications. I did one for the Fabian Society, which is a very left-wing website
Mm.
over here, and also one for the Conservative Home, which is a right-wing website. I think they were released within a week of each other. So this guy's obviously writing for everybody. And
Uh-huh.
then one of them was called Big Think, and I
Mhm.
wrote an article about Democritus and atomic theory, about him being the first kind of atomist.
Mhm.
Um, and they were the only ones to not only pay me, but also to ask me to come back. And so that actually was the beginning of what ended up being a 2-year or 1.5-year
Writing
freelance job
freelance.
gig.
Yeah.
And then over the time, I was doing more and more of them. I was getting good relationship with the people who work there, and I started doing a newsletter as part of the ecosystem with another
Mm.
client called the John Templeton Foundation, which I absolutely loved. And then at sometime at the end of last year, no, it must be in the middle at the start of last year, they said, "Do you want to come on board full time? Do you want to come and work for us?" And of course, you're right. You put your finger on it earlier when you said, essentially, it's a very safe job teaching. You get a pension, you're guaranteed to live forever, and suddenly this opportunity emerged. Um, I have young kids. I had one kid, then I've got a young kid, and my wife was pregnant at the time. So I thought, okay, well, I want to spend more time at home. My commute was getting a bit long and feeling very, very, very tedious.
Mm.
And I used to work in a kind of school where they do long days. And one day a week you have to stay, for example, till 10 o'clock at night. And
Oh.
then you'd have to, most days you wouldn't leave till
Mm.
about 5-ish. And then you have to get there very early because of the commute. And then you'd have to work Saturdays as well. So I just found as if there were lots of time I was spending away from my family. And I thought, okay, right, these two things in my life are synchronizing. I need to spend more time at home with my family, or I feel like I'm away from my family too much. And these people are offering me a job where I could work from home. And so I thought, if I'm not particularly religious or spiritual, but I thought, if there is a guiding force, that seems to be like a door opening when I need a door opening. So I took it, and that's it, and that's where I am now.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
writing full time at home, and then and loving it really. I'm enjoying both working for Big Think and writing.
Mhm.
My new books, and also then the Instagram has just taken off really recently. When I in February I started to do the reels and the videos,
Yep.
because I've always kind of put off a little bit because I thought my skill was in writing, and I still think I prefer writing to a
Mm.
little bit. But I wonder if in hindsight, subliminally, whether there was some kind of like element of myself which missed teaching and missed the presence of being in the classroom. Because essentially what my reels are, they're 90-second lessons
Yeah.
really. And so
Right.
I wonder if I'm, again, the skills I learned teaching maybe have fed into the reels.
Mm.
And then, yeah, 3 or 4 of them have done really well. So, the Ship of Heraclitus, the Ship of Theseus by
Mm.
Heraclitus, John Searle's Chinese Room, and John Locke's Inverted Qualia. They've just completely blown up, like million plus views, and they got me quite a lot of likes and
I
follows, which is good. So and that's where I am now. I think I'm on the I've got it open here 227 8 as I'm speaking, and
yeah.
people seem to like them. So
It's good.
I'm enjoying
Yeah.
that and seeing where that road opens. But it's a weird. I mean, it's a weird lesson for everybody, really. That life, the paths, they completely
True.
branch in ways that you can't imagine, and obviously you get lots of choices along the way. But the path itself is branching.
To be fair, it's very admirable that you were able to do a lot of things like publish on Tumblr, write, and then have freelancing stuff going on and release a book, all while having a job that requires you to be at school till 5 o'clock or till 10 o'clock sometimes.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, I should caveat that, I mean, before my old bosses kinda get angry that I wasn't working for them. I should caveat that, like, all schools generally have quite big holidays, but the schools I was working at, which are private schools, they have even longer
Hmm.
holidays. So they
Right,
work
right,
you quite hard in the term time, but you get longer holidays as a
right, right.
payback. And also, while the days are long, you do get quite big gaps in between. So, for example, you're expected to
Hmm.
do sport. I had to coach cross country often and football and things like that. And
Hmm.
then, that happens in the afternoon, and between lunch and that, you have like an hour and a half here and there and stuff. And if you get all your marking and your reports and that kind of stuff done, you do have this time.
Yeah.
And so when back in the day, I probably would have spent that time, either talking to some colleagues or just kind of like wasting time a little bit. But I
Yeah.
decided to, and once this hobby became a thing and became addictive,
Yeah.
you spend that time there. So yeah, I mean, the school holidays allow that to work. And
Yeah.
then, of course, working from home,
Yeah.
it seems to be I have more time as well because I'm used to
Right.
working on Saturdays. I'm used to working
Uh,
very long hours, and now
right.
my commute is
It's just an
a
advantage now.
5 meter walk to an office. Yeah. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's just an advantage that you had of working long hours then, so that now that you're home and don't have to do all the other redundant stuff, you have a
Yeah,
lot more time to do actual productive work. And you can
exactly.
also tell that genuine experience you have of teaching in your 90-second reels. Like you can tell it's someone who knows how to impart knowledge to others. It's not,
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, sometimes people, I do wonder. I say to myself sometimes, God, I wish I'd done these reels earlier, and I wish I'd like, got this kind of like success earlier. But then I kind of think also whether that would have worked. I wonder if that the process has made me where I am now. That you're doing
Mm-hmm.
the 11 years of teaching and learning my writing voice, doing some journalism, learning about the hooks and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that has allowed me to do the reels as well as I can. If I started doing the reels in 2015 or 2014, I imagine they would have been slightly hammier and slightly and harder. But the other thing is, of course, the technology is much easier. So I use a series of Adobe products to make my work, and
Mm-hmm.
I spent a long time working on how to work out how to do Adobe. I do Photoshop, After Effects, and Premiere Pro. But I mean, they're so easy now. Like, it took me essentially like 2 days to learn how to work out After Effects and Premiere Pro. I mean, it was 2
Mm-hmm.
long days, but I quite enjoy that kind of geeky
Right.
stuff. But I think back in the day, I think that was a lot harder. I mean, like, for example, I mean, AI, I mean, AI is obviously everywhere, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes it can be a little bit oversold in terms of what it can do. But one of the biggest things I found really useful is in Photoshop. It does really well. Well, 2 ways actually. It transcribes really well in well,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere, but I use it in Premiere Pro.
Mm-hmm.
The other things like Photoshop does this generating fill thing, which is really useful for like making images. So I use it mainly for philosophers. So because I'm doing my reels, which are obviously
Yeah.
portrait,
Mm-hmm.
I try to find the philosopher online. So let's say I'll just type in. I did one recently on who did it, on Clifford or Hume,
Mm-hmm.
and then the portraits obviously they don't quite work very well. So either what you do is you give the black bars
Mm-hmm.
for people to see, or what I do is I try to use this generative fill to add a little bit of detail. It
Yeah.
doesn't work all the time. It's not very good for
Yeah.
legs and arms
Yeah.
and stuff. But generally, like if you want background stuff, it actually makes it a little bit more of a portrait thing, so people feel like they're getting more of an image than just like a tiny little black cinema bar thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where we're at. Sorry. Tell me if I'm,
Yeah.
I'm rambling. Tell me to stop.
No. That's all right. This is what I want to know. When I didn't read your book. I heard the audiobook version of it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Great. Thank
So
you.
yeah. So when I was listening, one of the most all the insights are great. Obviously, it's like from the greatest minds in history. But one of the things I thought there should have been more of, well, it's not really the book for it, but I
Mm,
wanted to know what your vision of it was. Everything in that book is very factual and what the original
mm,
philosopher intended to say.
mm.
But I don't know what Johnny thinks about world peace, or what
Oh,
do you
wow.
think about
Yeah.
existentialism?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean that's in a way that's quite a good compliment that you've given me that because I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to keep the book like that because the problem is when you I wanted to try and be on the fence so people didn't feel like I was kind of preaching or that I'm
Mm.
presenting a biased view of these philosophers. Um, for two reasons really. One is that I feel as that people will engage with the material. Well, I think you do a more kind of authentic and genuine explanation of them if you try to keep your own opinion out of it. And the second point is I don't entirely know my opinion on a lot of them. And actually, if I think there's one benefit from what I do with mini philosophy and the book, it's that I do tend to present juxtaposing thoughts alongside each other, which um, again it does a series things. One, it lets people kind of like choose as a kind of a board of ideas that they can kind of say, well, okay, well, I like that, I want to research that a bit more, or that sounds rubbish, don't care about, I don't know, Paley's watchmaker argument, whatever. But also it kind of makes people realize that actually there are so many different opinions, so many different answers to all of these big important questions that actually it's not straightforward, it's not simple, and that there's an element of kind of choosing a philosopher, choosing an idea, which appeals to you, I think. But yeah, obviously I have my own opinions, but I have to say that I'm a bit of a moth. I flutter around a lot. I'm more of a magpie actually. I kind of pick whatever's ever shiny. I'm a very bad philosopher in that respect. Whenever I'm reading a book, I'm very easily swayed by the argument, by the rhetoric.
Mm.
Um, And so and same with politicians, actually, to be honest. If I listen to a politician, I'm like, oh, you're right. We have a program over here called Question Time where they line up, I think 6 or maybe 5, whatever, politicians or politically adjacent characters, and they have to offer their opinion on, so what does the panel think about Brexit? And then they'll all say something. And every time someone says something, oh yeah, that's a really good point. And the next person comes, that's a really good point. And it's only when I go away in the kind of the cold moments of like meditation, I imagine this Descartes person by the fire kind of scrunching about it and scrunching their brow thinking about it. But that's when I actually do my philosophizing, think, well, actually, maybe I don't think that, or yeah. And the other thing is, like, when you're reading a section of ideas, there's often a visceral response to them, and that intuition I find really interesting. So at the moment on my Instagram, I'm doing lots of stories, and I'm often which are questions to people, and I'm often presenting them as binaries. And of course, in philosophy, there is no binaries. It's never a yes or no. It's always going to be a it depends.
Caveated.
And sometimes I get a bit of stick for that. Some people will message me saying, clearly it's not a yes or no, it's a binary, and that is true. I think that is right. But well, if I put binary, then it would become boring. Everyone just so if I put it depends, it would become boring. Everyone would put it depends. But also, I think there's something value to be found about that intuition, initial kind of like, well, okay, no. I don't think that's right, or I think yes. So why do I get so angry about that opinion, but not about that opinion? I think that is an interesting question in and of itself, because I
Yeah.
ultimately believe that the journey of the philosopher and the point of philosophy is self discovery and revelation. That might make me unpopular with some other philosophers, because I mean, I like doing philosophy as an education, and obviously I'm doing outreach is what I'm doing on my Instagram account, and there's a whole different range of reasons why people might want to do philosophy. Like what's what William James calls the cash value? What's the point? What's the purpose of philosophy? And some people say it's to establish certain base level critical thinking skills, and that is true, like rationality, reason, appraisal, objectivity, as close as you can come to it. And I think that is true. You learn that from doing philosophy. But for me, I think that the greatest benefit of philosophy, and what I saw when I used to teach it for 11 years, was it as a kind of therapy, as a kind of self-discussion, and a kind of you're discussing yourself by doing philosophy. In fact, I think Nietzsche does say that. I think in his is it maybe either the Gay Science, Twilight of the Idols, one of his first opening chapter is anyway, he's saying that philosophers essentially always bring themselves. So whenever people, all philosophy is autobiography, I think he says, and I think
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I think all philosophers doing philosophy are also doing autobiography to an extent. But that's not a bad thing. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's about self-discovery and realizing who you are and what matters to you in life. And I think along the way you'll find some answers which will change who you are and which allows you then to change the world. Sorry,
Yeah.
I kind of got
Yeah.
on
No. Yeah. I think studying this also kind of lets you know that you're not on this weird journey alone, kind of. And there are people who have gone through the same thing that you are going through, like 100 years ago, and
Yeah.
there is a proper term or a phenomenon, or like a proper philosophy based on what you're experiencing, that kind of takes away the agency from you, and you're just like, c'est la vie.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and that's why I quite enjoyed the human, like more kind of human, kind of like philosophy for that. I think the classics were quite good for that. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, one of my favorite books, and Plato's Republic's obviously great, but also Seneca, Cicero. I think the Romans and the Greeks were very good at kind of making it very relatable to life. They were talking about people they knew and examples and stuff, and they listed examples. I think they went for a patch around what we call modern philosophy, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and stuff, where it becomes a little bit too example free. Because I think philosophers realize quickly that if you start giving examples and giving thought experiments, that it kind of like pins you down a bit too much, and people rip. And actually, this is what I'm finding on my answer. Actually, that people rip apart the thought experiment rather than the actual arguments. So, the one which really gets my goat. No, it gets my goat. That's wrong. Yeah. I find it a little bit amusing that with the trolley problem example, which has done really well for me. I think it's got like 2 million views at the moment. But anyway, like people just like for some reason, there's a portion of society, a big portion of society, which feels the need to break the thought experiment. They'll say, "Well, of course, why not just use your horn?" Or "This is ridiculous. Why
Yeah.
do people be on the tracks?" Or "Why not just turn the lever halfway through so it rolls and misses them
Yeah.
both?" Kind of thing. And then that's really not the point of the thought experiment. That's
Yeah.
really not why people are doing it. And that's the I've also tend to sometimes avoid those kind of thought experiments because people obsess about the particular thought experiment. And that's actually come
But
to bite me a little bit recently. If I did one about duty to the dead, and I gave an example about this lady who's trying to bury her mum, her dad, sorry, but she ended up not obeying his promise because she can't. I said it's eye-wateringly expensive, and I really regret those words because now everyone has been hung up on this idea that she can't afford it, and that
uh,
makes the question a bit different to what I want it to be. I
right,
want it to be
right.
about duties to the dead
Mm.
rather than her ability to afford
What?
funerals. But yeah, I agree. Finding like looking throughout history and looking at people who have done the same thing as you. I think Montaigne is really good for that as well. Like he's an essayist from the 16th, 17th century who's basically like talking about things, but also the Bible as well, and also classical mythology and in the Vedas as well. And yeah, great.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the trolley problem. I think most people try to break the thought experiments because the options that are given kind of force you to become the bad guy. Like you either kill five
Yeah.
or you kill one. I don't want to become a bad guy.
Yeah. Well,
It's
exactly. That's a good point.
yeah,
Sorry. Carry on.
it's usually the uh, a mindset that we have that if I don't make this
Mm.
choice, it's kind of not my responsibility. The hidden part of that penalty we get for inaction or like indecision is
Yeah.
not very apparent to us.
Yeah, no, good. I think that's absolutely right, and I think people don't want to appear because everyone sees themselves as the hero of their own story, don't they? Everyone's the
Hmm.
good guy in their story, and you're right. It's a lose-lose situation, and people don't
Yeah.
like that. People don't like the idea that they will be presented with. They want the idea that they can, if their back's against the wall, they'll break through the wall, kind of thing. But sometimes life
Yes.
isn't like that. Yeah, then you are going to upset somebody, and you're going to make a bad decision or a hard decision. And I think you're right, and particularly on social media, which is obviously a notoriously performative platform,
True.
that you don't want to say to anyone that, yeah, I'm going to kill one, unless you're joking about it. I'm going to kill one person because then everyone's like, well, you're a murderer then, how can
Yeah.
you do that and stuff? Well, what's the alternative? Killing five? You lose either way. Another one that which is similar in tone to that was the burning building dilemma, where you have to save
Hmm.
either a loved one, child, a
Or
brother,
the
parent, or the
elderly.
guy who had the cure for cancer.
Yeah.
Again, people are like, people got hung up on the actual scenario. People are like, well, what if he had the cure for cancer? Surely his team would know about it. Or why can't he just walk out the building like you can? That's not the
Yeah.
point. And again, yeah, people in that situation, there's no win-win, and that's an
Right. Yeah.
interesting one because it does pit people's moral kind of like
Hmm.
rationality,
Hmm.
moral reasoning against their moral intuitions or their base, maybe not even moral intuitions. They're just like maybe instincts about wanting to protect and save their loved ones.
True. True.
Um, but you're right. I think you're right. People want to be the shining knight in their own stories, but
Hmm.
actually, you
Yeah.
can't for life generally, let alone thought
Yeah. It
experiments.
doesn't let you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You say in one of your chapters that we will see in the future how we treat animals with the same disgust as we see racism and discrimination today.
Mm.
Yeah, that was a very powerful line. I don't know if it's by you or it's taken from somewhere, but that was a very good line, and it kind of connected me with the experiment. Oh, I'm blanking on the name. The experiment after World War II that was done to analyze if told by someone would you hurt another human.
Right. Yes. You mean the Zimbardo or the Milgram one? The Milgram's one where they
Milgram,
shot
yeah,
people, and the
the Milgram
Zimbardo's one
one.
where they put prisoners
Yeah,
and
The Milgram one.
Milgram one, the
Yeah,
shocking one. Yeah.
yeah. You
Yeah. No.
see, yeah, you can kind of see how horrified we are of what happened there. Yeah, just 100 years ago, a normal person living in Germany was let go.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, and it's yeah. I mean, I honestly don't know. So I kind of like speculated, man. I put it as a question because I honestly don't know about that because I suspect it might be that way because, um, yeah, I think the way maybe where that lab created meat, for example, the way that's going will just create so much like ethically sourced, ethically created meat that we won't even have the need to have battery farms and things. But it's difficult because any society when you're so like stewed in your cultural values
For
and norms,
right.
to go against them is by definition deviancy. It's a taboo. It's like to challenge them is rebellious. And of course, when you are a rebel or when you're a deviant, you don't know whether you're going to be on the right side of history or on the wrong side of history. There have been just as many like cruel, kind of like murderous, racist, homicidal, sexist rebels as there have been kind of like reformers and noble people. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think with that one, it's just the nature of it. And it's almost more of a kind of practical question. And the reason why so many people love meat and so many people don't really care about animal welfare, and so
Hmm.
therefore we have battery farms and we have like these very cruel ways of creating that meat. In the future, I think the logistics of that will change. I mean,
True.
I don't think at the moment the values will change drastically from what I'm seeing, and I think people just don't value animal life as much as human life, and that's
Hmm.
you know,
It's yeah.
yeah. I mean, we can debate that. We can debate that.
It's
But
it's like
I
the
probably
it's like the
go on.
biologically wired thing to keep your species intact and to continue it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
will
yeah, there is.
always
Yeah,
yeah.
there could be a biological kind of imperative for that, or it could be. I mean, a lot of people rationally kind of justify it. Like people say,
Hmm.
like we value things which have a higher level of cognition to
Hmm.
us. But then also there's also a duty of care element as well, like about
True.
how much do I care for that thing? And
Hmm.
interestingly, some people say that I would rather protect my dog or cat than some stranger I don't know.
Hmm.
I think kill a dog or a cat rather than any human being, but some people would argue that the connection and love I have for a dog or a cat is more important than some random stranger on the other side of the world who I never see. Um, so yeah, I mean, you can provide philosophical arguments for why humans are valued more, but yeah, I probably agree with you that I think there is some
Hmm.
kind of biological
I mean,
imperative.
it's
Definitely to look after your tribe anyway. Sorry, carry on.
yeah, definitely. And also, I think there is an element of selfishness in this, as if somewhere an animal dies versus a human dies, how much would it affect you? If human dies, it probably affects you more than an animal. But if your close pet dies, that would affect you more than some stranger dying. So I think there is
Yeah,
a selfish element at there as well of how
yeah,
what
and
makes your life better.
yeah, and I agree, and I think that's obviously part of the human condition as well, because I think farmers very much do not kind of try to form relationships with their cattle or their livestock. You don't
Mm,
give them names.
mm,
If you called your pig Babe, or give it a nice little cute name, you'd find it harder to slaughter it. In fact, there's a difference
true.
between even the word slaughter is a very value kind of like value laden word, isn't it?
Mm,
Slaughter is associated with meat, it's with farming, with agriculture, whereas murder and killing even is very different.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. Uh, uh, this is kind of also that hedonic calculus concept that Bentham, yeah, I'm butchering the pronunciation, sorry, uh, gave to us that you calculate the morality based on how good it makes your life. Basically, if something makes your life better and you're more happy, it's all
Mhm.
fine morally. So
Yeah.
if you can taste good meat, it's a-okay.
Yes.
But if
Yeah.
it makes you miserable, it's not great. Have you watched Dead Poet Society, the movie?
Yeah, well, a long time ago, obviously, I know that famous scene where he stands on the table, doesn't he? And
Oh,
yeah,
Captain, my
and
Captain. Yeah, no,
my cat, my cat.
there is
Yeah, that
a
stuff.
scene in that where Professor Keating tells them to read an introduction uh, to a book where it's written about how do you analyze a poem, a greatness of a poem, based
Mm.
on its structure and what message it's trying to convey and the importance of that message. So there is some graph that he lays down and tries to explain how a poem can be great. But Keating later asks the entire class to rip apart that page, and he says, poem and art can't be measured in mathematical terms. It's
Yeah.
something more than just on that primal level. So that's what
Yeah.
came to my mind when I was
Yeah, that's
reading.
an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I did a reel recently on Hume and his view on critics as well.
Mm,
Because yeah, I mean, art is an interesting area which seems to bridge, the subjective aesthetic experience of, the basic what you enjoy. I like jazz, you like heavy metal, whatever. Um, but also we have art critics and we have debates, we have top 10 lists and we can sit around
mm,
the table and we can meaningfully debate what is the best movie of all time, what is the best song of all time, and we can provide arguments for that. So yeah, yeah, I agree with what Keating's saying in that a little bit. You
Yeah,
know, I think I get his points that you can't reduce art to a formulation.
only. Yeah. The
But
fact
yet he's
that
also a
any
teacher.
movie, the fact that any movie can make into that top 10 is what makes it great. What makes the whole art great. If
Yeah,
there was a definite set of top 10, then it wouldn't be as much fun.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think there's the test of time criteria, which is quite good as well. Essentially, it's a democratic vote, really. It's
Mm.
like, what art do people enjoy the most? But that doesn't apply always to, because I think we're on to Fast and Furious like 19 or something like that, aren't we? Because they obviously sell very well. But I think few people, even the fans of the Fast and Furious genre, probably wouldn't say it's high art.
Mm.
Um, so obviously there's a line between popularity and greatness.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but I don't
yeah.
think Fast and Furious will stand the test of time. But sorry, go on.
Yeah, one of the other chapters that hit me very hard in your book was the
Mm.
appeal of the void.
Oh yeah,
That was a
yeah, the
very
void.
that's a very great chapter. I was listening to it and I was thinking about how most of where I have ended up, like a 50% of the things
Mm,
are because I was scared of taking the decision when I was supposed to take or making that choice.
mm.
I'm pretty sure you know about the choice paradox of
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I like that chapter. Well, I like that idea, La Pile de Vide, as well. And when I taught it to my students, they also loved it because, well, for two things really. One is there's a really easy and good access into existentialism as a theory. It kind of teaches
Mm,
Sartre's theories and of kind of this long for non-being, but also it's a really relatable idea, isn't it?
yeah,
I
yeah.
think I give some few examples now. The example for me is the book. So a little bit of me in that book was the railway bits, seeing a speeding rail go by.
Mm,
I get that surprisingly often. If I'm on the railway platform and I see there's a railway a train coming
mm,
down really fast, it's not stopping. I'm not going to jump in front of the train. Don't worry. You don't need to call anyone about me. I'm not suicidal. But there is that weird moment as it's coming near that and I think Sartre talks about it in these terms that where you don't trust yourself not to do it. That
mm,
you recognize that there's an element of your choice of an ability to do it, and there's like a you recognize in that moment the exhilaration of
yes,
choice,
yeah.
and that is terrifying. And I often get like literally a wave, a spike of adrenaline.
Chill,
I get like,
yeah.
wow, like wow, okay, I didn't do that. Thank heavens I'm alive. But yeah, and I think I talk about screaming in the library. I think sending a note, whatever it is, a punch, whatever. People have those kind of like I think
Impulsive.
cataclysmic choices that they don't do, but they are exhilarated that they could do it. I love that idea, the pelle de vide,
Yeah.
the void.
It's the same feeling I think you get when you're on top of a high building, edge of a tall building, or staring at the sea at night, when it's
Yes.
just black. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, nothing's gonna
And also
happen, but yeah.
yeah, well, and also I think what I'm talking about here, what you're talking about there, seems like something called the sublime, that kind of almost an aesthetic appreciation of the terrible things in life. And I think
Mm,
there's a beauty to terror, the witnessing something terrible from a safe vantage point.
mm.
Because obviously terrible things are not fun if you're actually in the
In
middle
them,
of it. If
yeah,
you're in the eye of a storm on a little dinghy, you're about
yeah,
to die. There's nothing beautiful about that. But if
yeah,
you're in like a safe cottage on top of a cliff top, looking at the
yeah.
thunderstorms shatter on the sea, that is
Mm,
beautiful. Because
right.
but you recognise it's terrible, but obviously you're
Mm,
safe from the safe side of your existence. And I think maybe La Pelle de Vida is a little bit like that. You're recognizing the terrible power of your choice from a safe position of not doing it, not choosing it.
mm.
So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Have you read Notes from Underground of Fyodor Dostoevsky?
Dostoevsky, I've read snippets of that. So yeah, I
He
unfortunately
talks.
I've read Crime and Punishment. So go on, carry on.
No, no. Yeah. In that, he talks a lot about this sublime and beautiful and sublime.
Does
Uh,
he? Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah. So that's interesting because he must have been Burke was first. No, Kant was first, then Burke. So they were the two big ones who talked about that. So yeah, he must have come after those two. So he must be working in that tradition, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm always curious and fascinated, but I wish I knew more about like how the lives are, what these big philosophers and novelists knew in terms of philosophy.
Yeah.
I think, for example, Dostoevsky when he was writing, was he aware of Voltaire? Was he aware of Burke? Was he aware of Hume? Probably he's
Hmm.
an intelligent man, literate man, but was he entirely stewed in Russian and probably Eastern European philosophy? Did he know what kind of like I don't know George Berkeley in Ireland was writing. Possibly, I don't know.
Mm.
In fact, weirdly, I've got it on my phone. I didn't get it out for this interview. I don't think it's a video on. There's a book here called Examined Lives by James Miller. Um, it's weird. I don't think it's a well-known book, but it's good autobiographical book. It tells you that not autobiographical book of the philosophers, and it's really good for that. Actually, it tells you like how the philosophers knew each other, and I often wonder how much they knew about each other, and because that's one of the biggest differences between I think academic philosophy and reading a book of philosophy as well is it kind of does contextualize it a little bit.
Mm.
Like you kind of know who they're talking about, who they're responding to. The example I give of this is often Spinoza. Like
Mm.
Spinoza, you can obviously understand him as a discrete philosopher, but it makes much more sense to know that a lot of what he's writing is a deliberate reply to Descartes and working in the Cartesian tradition.
Mm.
So when he's using words like substance, he's deliberately referring to a Cartesian substance rather than kind of a modern
More.
understanding of
Yeah.
substance. But all philosophy is like that a little bit. Like you have to get your ear in, you have to work out what they mean by these words. And I think that's why a lot of people find it hard to actually go away and read philosophy because I do sometimes feel like I'm doing a disservice in my reels and when I was a teacher as well, actually, to be honest. Obviously I made my lessons engaging and accessible as I do with my reels. I use everyday language, a very accessible language. But then I find that people then say, okay, what can you recommend I read after this? Okay, go away and read The Genealogy of Morals by Nietzsche. And they read the first 2 pages, and Nietzsche's quite an accessible philosopher, and it's kind of like, oh bloody hell, this is dense, this is hard. What does he
Yeah.
mean by that? And you have to work at it, and
Mm.
I don't think it's easy to do that nowadays. Sorry.
Yeah,
Carry on.
and I think I see a couple of things is reading these comes like I don't know, as a natural progression. You start reading fiction and these light books where you can like go on like 100 200 pages per day, and then you can just sit and grind them out, and it's fun. Like you're reading a story, and then you start reading something like Notes from Underground, and you're 4 pages in and you have no idea what's going on, and you have to
Yeah,
like actually pay
yeah,
attention to what is happening and
yeah,
make
and
an
it's weird
effort.
because you get this
Mm.
weird sense of kind of guilt that you have to finish as well because you're
Mm.
often told it's a classic. And that
Mm.
particular example, and Dostoevsky particularly as well, he's very popular on Instagram, on social media, and he's often
Mm.
quoted all the time. You can think, well, right, okay, obviously I have to go away and read him. And you read him, and actually, well, wow, okay, this is dense. And you do find the snippets there, but you have to stay at it. You have to stay at it for like
Yes.
even now. Like I'm philosophically educated, and I've read quite a lot of philosophy. And even now, when I pick up a philosophy book, I have to spend like a couple of days before I get my ear in. I have to
Mm.
learning how the author writes, what they mean by
Mm.
that word, what they're
Mm.
doing in the beat and stuff. And I think people don't really expect that or want
Yeah.
to invest in that,
Yeah.
particularly if you're reading anything pre-modern, any pre-modern philosophy, and
Yeah.
even modern philosophy written by a philosopher. Yeah,
Right.
it's hard.
Yeah. You just go on reading other books, so this just feels
Yeah,
like a pretty big road stopper.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you read Myth of Sisyphus by
Yeah,
Albert
yeah,
Camus?
I have. Well, that's an interesting one as well. Like basically, he
Yeah.
only has 1 page where he talks. So everyone knows about the Sisyphus idea, don't they? Like pushing up the board up a hill.
Yeah. Yeah.
But actually, essentially, it's like tacked on right at the end of the essay. It's like
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole preceding bit which is very different to
Right.
that. I mean, I like Camus actually. He almost bucks what I said earlier that I think he is very readable because he's essentially a novelist first and a philosopher
Mm.
second. I mean,
Mm.
the border is very thin anyway.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's really good. I think I might have it on my shelf or something. But yeah,
Oh,
anyway, well, have
then.
you read that? Have you read it? Have you?
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask you this. What you're looking for the book? Yeah.
I was, yeah. I've stopped
Yeah.
looking. Don't worry.
Yeah. What, according to you, is the meaning of life? What is
Oh
Johnny's
man.
meaning of
Okay.
life?
Whoa. Okay. Yeah.
That's the right
Okay.
answer.
So boring. I mean, yeah. No, it's the right answer. Thank you. Um. I mean, it's important because Aristotle does answer this, and I do agree with him. And I hate to be that person to push it back to a better philosopher than I am.
Hmm.
I'm not going to say I'm better
Well,
than
that's
Aristotle.
what philosophers are for.
But essentially, Aristotle's first chapter of Nicomachean Ethics is asking, what is the end point of life? What's the point?
Mm.
And he talks about eudaimonia, just flourishing. And I
Mm.
think he's right in that. I think that the point of life is to flourish as a human being. And what does that look like? I think it's to live a life of virtue, and I think it's to love, which is, and maybe that's extra Aristotle because Aristotle doesn't really talk about that as much.
Mm.
I think love other people and to be loved. I think. The two go hand in hand. I think I think it's hard to love and to be loved if you're not virtuous
Yeah.
to some extent. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think and to be virtuous and to love. But so I have to praise Aristotle a lot. I know he got a lot of his science wrong, and he does have very misogynistic areas and stuff. But I
Uh,
think his Nicomachean Ethics. I recommend if anyone reading one book, that for me is the one where I'm like, wow, okay,
hmm.
this is hard to
I
beat.
mean, just
And
take the
I mean,
book.
people love Stoicism these days. Stoicism has got all of the
Yes.
limelight
Yes.
and the prestige.
Yes.
But Stoics were at an Aristotelian school. They're a eudaimonic school. They were literally came after Aristotle. Essentially, they're drawing out elements of Aristotle and emphasizing them, which is fine. But it's all there in Aristotle. The living the life of virtue, which is a key to Stoicism.
Yeah.
Aristotle said that earlier, but
Well, Aristotle hasn't got a Ryan holiday.
he hasn't got a
Yeah.
Ryan holiday exactly. He
That's
needs
where
some
he's
more of
missing.
a yeah,
Yes.
he's got Thomas Aquinas and Alistair
Yeah.
McIntyre, but who are not as big. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. No, that's interesting though. What I would have you subscribe to Aristotle's way of
Mm.
looking at it. I think I would subscribe to this Albert Camus way of looking at it. Like
Right,
there is
yeah.
nothing, and you're just like, if I can spend today happy and you know, it's
Yeah,
all
well, that's
great.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. I mean, essentially, I mean, the big difference between Camus and Aristotle is the idea of telos or purpose, or
Hmm.
that we have some kind of like ingrained purpose. Because Aristotle's theory doesn't work unless you agree with the idea that there is a way to flourish.
Hmm.
Often there's the way to flourish, but there is a way to flourish. Whereas Camus kind of says that's a self-defined thing, or existentialism does anyway. Camus kind of believes just give up anyway and try. And just enjoy it while you can,
Yeah.
which is fine. But I don't know. I think, and that's where possibly theology and belief and faith comes in to Aristotle,
Hmm.
because I do think you can't necessarily justify that idea that there is a purpose to humanity.
Hmm.
That's what philosophers call a foundational belief. I think that's a basic starting point. I think you have to
True.
a basic value. You have to accept that, and I do. I think there is a purpose, a point to being human.
Hmm.
And that is a position. It's a position of faith. I think. I mean, I can probably point empirically. I mean, there is lots of studies recently done about kind of eudaimonic happiness versus hedonic happiness, about the like
Hmm.
flourishing happiness versus hedonic, and
Hmm.
how eudaimonic happiness is often bigger than the former.
Hmm.
And you can often point out to ingredients which are either essential to eudaimonic happiness or often coexisting, often correlating. And you could probably then therefore build like a theory of eudaimonia, which I think you could do a science of eudaimonia.
Hmm.
But my position is not that. I think
Hmm.
that flourishing, all humans can flourish, and I believe that flourishing is only capable through virtue, being
Hmm.
virtuous.
Hmm.
But
I
you're right.
think
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I think the Camus idea kind of uh, entices me because maybe it gives the idea of flourishing kind of gives you an inherent response to flourish, responsibility to flourish. Like if you haven't flourished in your life, whatever maybe your definition of flourishing, if you
Mm.
haven't done it, there is a sense of regret. But in Camus, there is nothing. Is whatever you do is in your
Yeah,
head. I
yeah.
think
No,
that's what
that's
entices
interesting.
me. Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder if yeah. So it's difficult to whether even if we can even use the word like moral responsibility with Aristotle, because that word of moral responsibility, I think, owes itself very much to kind of like Kant almost, and
Hmm.
utilitarianism. Whereas
Hmm.
virtue theory is a character based ethic, so it's kind of more about just being the best person you can be, and whether you have a moral obligation to be virtuous. It's somewhat of a
Uh,
circular truism that how can be it's virtuous to be virtuous,
hmm.
because Aristotle explicitly says the reason why you want to be virtuous is it has a purpose, there is a reason to it, and that's so you can be happy.
Hmm.
um Virtue in and of itself is, I think, no one,
No.
why
Yeah.
be brave,
Hmm.
why be wise, why be altruistic, why be
Yeah.
courageous, whatever. I mean, and that's a question that Kant never really gets over.
Hmm.
Why do a good
Hmm.
action? I think Kant
Hmm.
ever really resolves that.
True.
He tried to.
Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
sorry.
with as you said, the Stoicism hype train is very true. Uh,
Mm.
I hate to be that person, but that is how I got into reading
No,
philosophy
it's good.
and getting. But at least I was that wasn't of short form content. I was watching some YouTube video, and then that's how I came across Stoicism. And I think it was from TED or some channel like that, and that's how I got hooked. And then I started researching all this isms, nihilism, existentialism,
Yeah,
and all
no,
that
it's
stuff.
good. No, I have a lot of time and respect for Stoicism. Even the holiday version of Stoicism. My only problem with the gripe possibly is labeling it Stoicism. That I think the bits what people find appealing and attractive is the cognitive behavioral therapy element of it.
Mm,
It's the bit which works, and I think that's brilliant. I love that. I think that's great. I think talking about that gap between
mm,
the world and reaction, talking about
mm,
taking control of your emotions and choosing how to react to the world. I think that's really important and really valuable. But that's not stoicism. That's like saying being a Christian is going to church on Sundays. Obviously, it's important to a lot of people, and it's a key element of being a Christian. But that's not what being a Christian is. And Stoicism has a whole kind of like, well, ancient Stoicism has a whole what we now would call almost theological, religious kind of
mm,
connotation. The idea there is a logos underpinning the universe, which is this kind of force that we have some kind of connection with, and they're often quite deterministic. Stoics. But also, like even Stoicism as a system, like emphasizes virtue as being the end point, and I
mm,
think that's lost in a lot of people who say they are Stoics or like Stoicism. They don't talk about like virtue as being. I mean, maybe I'm being unfair. Actually, that's not probably true. I think a lot of Stoics do talk about virtue nowadays. But the framing within a system is where I think it's
mm.
called Stoicism with a capital S rather than Stoic practices.
Ah,
Um,
yeah,
but yeah,
but
no, I love it. I do it myself. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
uh, just there is that appealing nature of that stoicism that has gotten a lot of people into philosophy, not just into stoicism, that being like a entry door, and then
Mm,
they start reading, and then nowadays
mm.
obviously a lot of more people are into philosophy than how many people would be like 100 years ago or something. uh,
Mm.
what do you think of this like huge like obviously philosophy, when you think about it, is like the top or the brightest or the great thinkers of the society are like philosophers, and rest everyone's like stuck in the
Yeah.
day-to-day loop is what it looks like. But what do you think of having like the general public be active participants in contributing to philosophy?
Oh, I think definitely there should be. I mean, I would disagree with the sense that I think that academic philosophy in and of itself make you kind of like elite and privileged. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's a kind of like philosopher kings, like Plato believed that philosophers, because they've reflected and rationalized about truth and justice and goodness, that they are better equipped to rule. Um, I disagree with that from an academic point of view, but I would also agree with Aristotle's idea that of the phronimon, the wise person who is a philosopher essentially, who've developed wisdom over the course of their life. I think that makes them better equipped to be advice givers and or possibly rule
Mm-hmm.
creators and legislators as well. Um, but yeah, the question about public philosophy, I guess. And so what was the question again? Sorry, I kind of
No, how do
got
you
digressed in my
feel?
own thought.
Yeah, as you said, like Aristotle, after gaining so much
Mm,
experience and being such a key figure, is more capable of giving a sound advice or having
sorry, yeah,
rational thoughts.
that's right.
Now,
Okay.
like having much of the greater public being able to give advice or have
Mm.
thoughts on these things, how does that make you feel, or where do you
Oh,
think
right, okay,
that
yeah. I mean, this is
is
where I'm
a
slightly unpopular maybe among other philosophers, possibly, that I believe actually philosophy. I have a very broad definition of philosophy, that
Mhm.
it's the mixture of curiosity and willing to dig deeper into
Mm,
concepts and ideas. And because that's so broad, then it almost dissolves the discipline
mm,
as a separate faculty. And what it does is that, and this is why I think you have a philosophy of biology, you have a philosophy of sociology, you have a philosophy of English, you have a philosophy of poetry, you have a philosophy of books, whatever. You have a philosophy of everything, because I believe it's the thread which underpins things. And actually, if you go to any university course, they've essentially like got to make 6 modules a year in the UK system anyway, 6 modules a year about your subject, and
mm,
inevitably that's going to touch on philosophy. You're going to talk about the meta. study.
Mm.
You can either meta studies in science. You can talk about research disciplines in history, whatever. That's philosophy. Historiography is very similar to philosophy, I would argue.
Mm.
And questioning your sources and questioning what counts as good evidence. And so I would argue if you've taken that broad understanding of philosophy, I think everyone can be a philosopher, and I think everyone is a philosopher a lot of the time.
Mm.
I think um, I don't think it's by accident that most people in life, after a few drinks, maybe at the end of a night or whatever, they'll start doing philosophy. They'll start saying,
True.
is it wrong to cheat on your partner? Or what do you think about, do you believe in ghosts? Or
Uh,
is it, why are you a vegetarian? Once all the pleasantries are out the way and maybe tongue's been loosened by a bit of wine,
mm.
people start doing philosophy. And I think that is, well, probably a human need.
Mm.
Um, but B, I think it shows that philosophy is everywhere, that we all want to do philosophy.
Mm.
Sorry.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, Seeing that you have read a lot of books, I am relatively a new reader. I've been reading for like past 1.5, 2 years.
Yeah.
What books would you recommend are like super essential? Like missing them would have been like a regret in your life.
That's an
It
interesting
doesn't have
question.
to
So,
doesn't have to be like valuable or meaningful. Like they don't have to give me
yeah.
anything. Like, oh man, that's such a great book. I would want to miss that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean, it's a very difficult. I get asked this quite a lot, actually. Like, what books would you recommend? And there are
Mm-hmm.
certain philosophy books I kind of have on my list, which I kind of rattle off. But for me, when you're asking me what books, it's so hard to disentangle that question from where I was in life at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
for example, a book that I recommend, well, that mattered a lot to me, was a Tolstoy wrote a very short essay, almost, called Confession.
Mm-hmm.
And it's full of existential, religious kind of musings of essentially the very old Tolstoy, who had gone off to live with the peasants in rural Russia. And only now do I look back and think, actually, well, he was, at the time he was doing stuff which was very good. But actually, in Denmark, Kierkegaard was saying the same things much better than Tolstoy was, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But they were asking the right questions at the right time, and they were definitely saying things that Sartre would develop and that Nietzsche would develop later. Or actually, no, I need to check my time with that. I think Nietzsche might be about the same time. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
he was saying, and it appealed to me, and it opened the question, so I recommend that to people as an introduction to existentialism generally, and to the philosophy of religion, probably more even than Sartre. Um, and then when it comes to, like, reading books, I think Alistair MacIntyre's After Virtue was one of the first books I read, which weirdly, I read it out of order. So you should really read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics first and then read MacIntyre's After Virtue. But I read After Virtue and I really liked his arguments. I thought he hit it on the head. And then I went back to read Nicomachean Ethics. I thought, well, actually, this is great as well. And I also get MacIntyre's changes. So I'd recommend, After Virtue by MacIntyre, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a good argument, but also he does touch on lots of philosophy as well. So you kind of like learn philosophy as well as the argument. I would recommend Tolstoy, his Confession. Simone de Beauvoir, I personally find her style of writing very accessible and easy. I enjoy reading her. Same with
Mm-hmm.
Hannah Arendt. I enjoy reading her as well. Um, I'm trying to think of other major moments of philosophy in my life. To be honest, let me look at my bookshelf because I keep all my favorites up here. Really, actually, they're mainly history recently. Um, no, I think that's, about yeah, and you mentioned Camus earlier. That's obviously great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, the one book which I think is really underrated, and as well, he's not underrated because he's huge as a philosopher. But I mentioned him earlier, Kierkegaard. His book
Mm-hmm.
Either Or, I think, is just a really, really good book. I think, particularly because existentialism is famous for being, it's kind of like, God is dead, a
Yeah.
religious philosophy, and I think Kierkegaard does a really good job at marrying existentialism with religion.
Mm.
Gabriel Marcel tries to do it in France later on, but I find him really dense and hard to understand. We talked about earlier about having getting your ear in. I think Marcel belongs
Mm.
to a tradition which I just don't know at all. So to understand Marcel, I would have to do about 17
Ah,
different books to read before him.
right.
Whereas Kierkegaard, I think you can read from the go. You can just pick them up and off we go.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there we go. So let's say Tolstoy's Confession, MacIntyre's After Virtue, de
Aristotle.
Beauvoir, let's pick the ethics of our ambiguity,
Mm-hmm.
Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and let's go Kierkegaard's Either Or. I think those for me get a reflection of who I am.
Hmm.
But then, now having just presented that, then I'm thinking also that I can't recommend a list of books without mentioning Descartes,
Hmm.
because he was brilliant, and Plato's Republic is they're fantastic books. But that 5 there is a very personal list of what I personally find enjoyable and what awoke me to philosophy.
Hmm.
But if I was offering a book about what you should read about philosophy, that would be a very different list, I think.
So,
So yeah.
it's the same feeling when you're in a library wandering around what books to pick, and then you realize there is a billion books, and you probably will never get around to reading
Yeah,
everything.
well, yeah, it's like Borges did that, the short story author. He talks about the infinite libraries and stuff, and that feeling of,
Yeah.
never being able to know. But, by the way, I do have to go in about 5 minutes or so. So,
Yeah,
so
that's all right.
if you've
Okay,
got any
so
big questions,
yeah, so I'll try to wrap it up. Uh, I just have two questions, small ones.
go for it, please.
Yeah. I ask this to everyone. I'm not sure how you would be. Yeah, fine. So during the first year or the first day of your college life, back when you were studying, the first day you entered college, if you were able to meet the Johnny from that day, what conversation would you have with him?
Oh, about philosophy or about life
No,
generally?
it's
Hmm.
it's it's your private conversation. You can have whatever you want with him.
I mean, I can't think of anything which isn't a cliche and that everyone else
No,
doesn't say at
yeah.
all. It's just like it is just so it's difficult because as you get older, you do look back and think, I wish I'd just taken more risks and been more stupid and done more, like live the life of the
Mm,
student, the first year student. Do that more. I think I did a lot. I
mm-hmm.
did not a brag. I did quite a lot of it, but not. I don't think enough. And as you get older, the responsibilities and your body creaks in and stuff. But it's impossible to really to do that because you are of the moment. I also I make the analogy with parenthood. Like every person who've got kids, the advice they give to new parents is like sleep now and get as much sleep as you can.
Yeah.
And it's just such like a pointless thing to say. It's like no one is not sleeping as much as they want to. You can't bank
True.
sleep to new parents. But anyway, so I'd go back and say that, um, and say yeah, just enjoy it. But that's I mean, it's quite a good sign that I can't think of much more else I would say
Very
apart
true.
from that, it's very much kind of like
Have
amor
fun.
fati here, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
loving my fate. I quite like that.
Yeah.
Because I made some amazing friends there. I had some amazing times, and I still look back at first year university as being probably one of the best years of my life. So, yeah,
That's great.
there you go.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah. So your new book is coming, small book,
yeah.
Our Big Brains, a mini philosophy. Uh, what what sneak peek would you want to give us about?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So this I take the mini philosophy of treatment and I apply it to psychology. And I talk in the book actually that the psychology and philosophy were essentially walking hand in hand for millennia. And it was
Hmm.
only around the late 19th century and early 20th century that they started to kind of go their separate ways, and we call them two different things. And actually, I think the psychologists and the philosophers' aims are very similar. They're trying to unpack the human condition and the human mind. And so what I do in mini psychology is I look at all of the range of psychology in its different disciplines and manifestations. I look at social psychology, I look at criminal psychology, I look at kind of experimental psychology, educational psychology. And what I do is I make the ideas accessible and entertaining. So, like with philosophy, it's more of an invitation for you to find out, well, learn about psychology, but
Hmm.
also find out what matters to you and what is interesting to you. We talked about earlier about how philosophy is essentially it was like a tasting board. You can like
Hmm.
you like this, I'm going to research this more. And I think with psychology, I do the exact same thing. It's you can read it from cover to cover, and then you'll go
Pick one.
away and there'll be 5 or 6 things which will stay in your head. And I say those 5 or 6 things matter the most.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's I'm teaching about psychology, but more than anything else, I want you to go away and learn about psychology.
Yeah. That
So,
is very true. That is how I read, listened to your book. I was listening to them, and each chapter I felt resonated with me. I had put them in my notes, and then later I went and read about
great.
them on the internet.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly how I want it to be treated. Yeah. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
That makes me happy.
That makes me happy that I read it
Yeah.
how the author wanted me to. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Where should people find you if they want to keep up
Lovely.
with? everything
Oh,
you're
where should
doing?
people find me? So Insta is the best bet. I mean, I'm doing quite well at the moment in terms of follow account, but I tend to reply to every message I get
Mhm.
eventually. It might take me a while, but that's Instagram is probably the best way to contact me. Otherwise, email contact@miniphilosophy.com is the best way to contact me email wise. But yeah, that's it. I mean,
Thank you, Johnny. I would have never imagined this happening. Thank you
oh,
for all
well,
your
thank you for having me.
insights.
Sorry, I
And
rambled too much about my life at the start. You
no,
could have had more time for
no,
philosophy,
no, no,
but
no. Of course
yeah,
not.
edit it fine.
Getting to know about your life is also the part of this conversation, so it's great.
Great,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Well, have a great day or evening for you, isn't it? I guess now.
yeah. It's around 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, well, enjoy dinner and bedtime, whatever, and stuff,
yeah.
and
Thank you.
see you later on. Thank you.
See you,
Let me know
man.
when it's out.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll make sure to let you know. Yeah. Thank
okay.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.